Okay, it is time for us to get to Antrim's Mount Rushmore, and really we should have 2 or 3 Mount Rushmores for Antrim, because when you start to look at the assembled talent and the history of the county, then you're into some fairly storied careers. We actually were speculating about this earlier, that we could actually have had a simple boxing Mount Rushmore from Belfast, let alone the entire county of Antrim. We've somewhat loaded the dice early on in this part of the conversation, in that we have 2 hurlers with us. Our selector this week is Neil McManus, of course, from Antrim and also Cushendall. And the challenger this week is Ciarán Barr, who, of course, hurled with Antrim in the 80s and was a good Vincent's Club man. So I feel a little bit guilty here, Neil, in that we actually don't have anybody yet from rugby. We'll get Stephen Ferris a little bit later on. So am I having 4 hurlers on Mount Rushmore? Is that what's happening?
That would be my preference, Ger, but unfortunately in Antrim, that's probably not how it's gonna pan out. The first 2 hurlers really who come to mind are Terence McNaughton from my own club in Cushendall, and the man on the other end of the call here, Ciarán Barr. He was our first ever Ulster All-Star in 1988. He captained Antrim to the All-Ireland final in 1989. He was also a renowned water polo player as well. So Ciarán would be somebody that we'd be very proud of in County Antrim. He also played in the All-Ireland club final with his club, Donovan Rossa. But there's been so many great sports people come out of Belfast, alone, from snooker, such as Alex Higgins, from even, you look at the boxing talent that we have had through Renty Monaghan, from a long time ago, but Dave Boy McCauley, Wayne McCulloch, even recently, and the likes of Carl Frampton, we're spoiled for choice whenever it comes to sport in Belfast and the county of Antrim.
Yeah, a bunch of boxing medals in the Olympics as well, which we might get to. Ciarán, when you were a kid, who were the GAA sports idols that you would have kind of heard stories about or read about or had conversations to you, like that were inspirational for you guys from that team that did come through in the 80s?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to answer the question or I'm not going to give you the answer that you might think I might give you. So I would say one of the first people that I would have been aware of from Belfast or from Antrim would have been Mary Peters. Just Olympics, the whole idea of the Olympics in the 70s. You had the World Cup in the 70s and then, Brazilian team. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I'm 55, so I was born in 64. All of a sudden, in the middle of the Troubles, we have this girl who comes back with a gold medal from the Olympics. We're like, how'd that happen? Who's she? Never, completely no idea who she was or what she did. And now when you look back, that she won that competition and the people that she won it against, it was extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. So she would have been one of the first sports people I would have had in my head. And as a star player, a star athlete. And like you would have watched that Olympics and subsequent Olympics, and it was like you kept saying to yourself, "But Mary Peters is the Olympic champion." Like it's like sounds ridiculous when you say it now, but she from Northern Ireland, from Belfast, the Olympic champion, amazing. One of the other people, I guess, hurling wise, with my own club, a fellow called Sean Collins, super player, the Hamills. But one of the Donnellys, Eddie Donnelly. I would have been conscious of Eddie Donnelly as a kid, playing for Ballycastle. Ballycastle were in a couple of All-Ireland club finals. He played for Antrim and Ulster for years and years and years. And if Eddie Donnelly had been around when I was playing or when Neil was playing, like Eddie Donnelly would be one of the first guys to pick on the team. Very, very great player, but a genuinely nice guy, super fella. And I was only an 18, 19-year-old coming into the panel. He was like in his 30s, senior guy, leaving the panel, on the last sort of season or two of his career. So he was one of the guys that was somebody that I was conscious of. But Belfast, as you said, like George Best. As a kid, I never saw him play. But as a kid, you're growing up and you're playing soccer matches and you're playing in somebody's back garden, and someone always wanted to be George Best, And again, from where he came from, and what he did, extraordinary, like absolutely extraordinary talent.
This is where we get into the controversial element of things in our Mount Rushmore series, because George Best is already etched into the mountain of County Down. So what is your response to that, first of all? Well,
there you go, So I know the River Lagan is the problem there. So we'll give him the County Down if they want him. Who cares? As long as he's in there somewhere.
Not a bad time to be growing up, though, as a sports fan. So you've got a gold medal in the Olympics in '72, and that's off the back of a European Cup and a European Footballer of the Year from George Best. And then Alex Higgins kind of burst onto the consciousness of the world around that time. That's kind of the beginning of him becoming Hurricane Higgins as well. So, like, and all the boxers before that in the 50s and 60s, and that kind of continues through. Barry McGuigan fights big fights in the King's Hall as well. So, like, why was Belfast such a hotbed of international talent?
I think the boxing is the classic. You look at where boxers come from in general. It's usually pretty rough, tough, no messing places, And Belfast was a working shipyard, working docks. The same in Dublin, the same in any of these towns that you go around the US. The same thing. You need to be from the wrong side of the tracks. And there was plenty of that in Belfast. And that boxing, I read a great book recently, Sunshine and Shadow, Don McKay, about Jerry's story. Amazing. And like I grew up in all of that, Hughie Russell, Wayne McCulloch, Barry McGuigan. But before that, Minty Monaghan, as Neil mentioned, like boxing in Belfast was sort of like in the DNA. Didn't matter which side you came from, because it was working class. And I remember as a kid, my father sending us down to the Dominic Savio Boxing Club in Falls Road to toughen us up, go down, throw a few punches, find out whether you're able to take a punch and give a punch. I was only like, I'd say 6. Last like a couple of months, and then hurling and football, swimming, water. You can't keep doing everything. But my dad thought, I'd throw him down there, see all of us, to see what it was like. So there was always that. There was a boxing thing in Belfast. It was just a thing. But it comes from being tough, and it's a hard sport. It's so hard a sport. It's like professional cycling. Like they're loners, and they can take pain. It's a sport where you have to be able to suffer pain. So I'll jump slightly there, right, to somebody else who should definitely be on the list, who's A.P. McCoy. We talk about a guy who can take pain. Like, that's serious. Keeping your weight down for years and years and years, falling off horses at 30, 40 miles an hour. Like, geez, that's serious. Like, and then to be the top of a professional sport that is cutthroat. Because if you're no good at that, you don't last. You're not a good jockey. No one's paying you any money. You go ride horses for amateur. But if those guys are the top of their profession, really are. That's a tough game.
Yeah.
So McCoy would be up there,
I think McCoy. I think in all of the lists that we've done, AP McCoy would be a shoe-in any county, just by virtue of the fact that he was the number one every year for so long. And like we saw when he would fall, we would watch it. And again, it's that old adage about it's one of the few jobs in the world where an ambulance follows you around when you're actually at work. Neil, can I ask you, growing up in Cushendall, how aware of Mary Peters are you? How aware of AP McCoy are you? Like, is Mary Peters just a hero everywhere for all school kids?
Well, Mary Peters, I suppose, whenever you were being taught anything about athletics, and you're even in secondary school, Mary Peters was always the go-to. There's a quite a well-known running track in Belfast named after Mary Peters as well, and I think she kind of broke the mold. We've had a lot of obviously boxing success professionally and at amateur level in the Olympics for probably the last 30 years. But Mary Peters kicked that off. She kind of did put Belfast on the map from an athletics viewpoint. But in Cushendall, obviously, it's an area steeped in GAA. So Terence McNaughton was a very automatic hero for so many of the village of the county. And whenever I was growing up and starting to learn about hurling, it was the early 90s. So Antrim were really strong. Antrim had competed in Division 1 for the past sort of 6-7 years. Had obviously been to that All-Ireland final. We would also been very aware that there was lots of other really good sportsmen. You only have to look at the the Dunlops, who are just outside Ballymoney.
It's hard, I think, for people who don't come from a motorbiking and a TT tradition to fully understand just how good Joey Dunlop was, Ciarán. But when I was asking my friends who are from Belfast, who's on your Mount Rushmore, the first name, unequivocally, was Joey Dunlop. Why? Like, can you put any context on that for people who don't fully understand just how amazing he was?
Well, I think, first of all, right, Joey Dunlop was on my list. So AP McCoy and Joey Dunlop I had together, like two jockeys, effectively. But what you'd want to do is you'd want to drive up to the northwest and around Cushendall and then out to Ballymoney and then up to Coleraine and then actually drive the road or the roads that these guys race on. That's number one. And you just go, like, that's crazy stuff. And then the skill of them and the speed that they do it at is just off the radar. And then they go and do TTs and they race all around the world. So these fellas, and Neil would know more about them than me, because in West Belfast there used to be joy riders, not motorcycle riders. But like, it's a big tradition in the Northwest. It's a big thing, mechanical excellence, machines, the riders on those machines. It's a big culture. And there's people come from all over the world to go and watch those races in the northwest of the island. And like, I've driven on the roads, Bush Mills, up around there, and you just think these guys are racing on these things. It's extraordinary, the speeds that they're going at. But back to McCoy, it's like every year being able to repeat it, staying at the top for that long. That's the extraordinary thing, their dedication to it and the lifestyle of it. And clearly they loved it, because there wasn't a whole lot of money in it. They weren't doing it for a lot of money. But Joey Dunlop, like, as a kid, you would have been aware of him. As a young man, you would have been aware of him as he was coming through, and the whole Dunlop family, but him especially, and a very reserved sort of a person. You'd see him be interviewed on the television. He didn't have a lot to say, just sort of the charisma about him as well, because massively courageous. He just had to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So Neil, you're back there now. What can you tell us about that role that Joey Dunlop has? And you, when you're a kid, what does the name actually mean for you?
Like, Joey Dunlop, now his family would live very close to where my wife is from, and he's a legendary figure in that sport. He is somebody who's totally committed to it, obviously, and a very sad ending to his his motorcycle career, along with his brother Robert. But he is world renowned. Unfortunately for the GA guys, like Terence McNaughton and Ciarán Barr, didn't have the opportunity to be world renowned, but they were totally my heroes and the heroes for me and my friends growing up. But to the people of, like, they were known as the Armoy Armada. That's what that group of motorcyclists were known as, and because they were fearless, totally and utterly fearless. And the next generation of Dunlops has just carried that on, and the name will live with motorcycling all around the world. You have to remember, from this tiny small place, these guys who fixed their own motorbikes at the kitchen table, who didn't really get involved in the professional side of the sport too much, because they were in it for the love of the sport. They managed to really captivate an entire nation who would follow them anywhere around the world. Obviously, unfortunately, Joey died, and I think it was Estonia in a race. But it was massive news at home when that happened, because like, he was revered all around that area because he was such a nice guy, a humble guy, but he loved motorcycle racing, and he was a hero to so many people who are involved in that sport, which is massive along our coast.
So the way this works is, obviously, Neil makes his selections, Ciarán can edit it, and then we get a final pick of somebody, and that's going to be Stephen Ferris in a moment. We haven't spoken about rugby. Obviously, there's famous Ireland and Lions captains. We haven't talked about soccer yet either. And like, you know, Brendan Rodgers' career has not been fully told just yet, and he's had a really excellent managerial career. I mean, I don't know where Billy Bingham was from, but does Billy Bingham have a case for being on Mount Rushmore? Ciarán, he was part of the team in '58. That's beats Czechoslovakia, and do they reach a quarterfinals or definitely quarterfinals of a World Cup, or get out of a group, and then obviously takes the team to a World Cup in '82 and again in '86 as a manager.
I'd say it'd be some players on that team. Jerry Armstrong, who played for St John's GAA club, great footballer, and then became a professional soccer player. Like, Jerry was a fantastic athlete, great speed. That famous goal that he scored against Spain in that World Cup was amazing. Norman Whiteside, another, like, you know, people forget about, like, 17-year-old from Man United, first class, like a very, very good footballer. Now, on the rugby, we haven't talked about the rugby, but I can see Stephen has joined us. On the rugby side, when I was a kid, Willie John McBride, like, was right up there. Like, I actually played rugby for a couple of seasons as a schoolboy just to try it out. I played for Cook and I played for Malone. And the reason I stopped playing rugby was because I couldn't defend myself. You get stuck at the bottom of a rock. You get walked all over. At least in a hurling match, I had a hurling stick to defend myself with. But Willie John McBride was very clearly in my conscience as a kid, as was Mike Gibson. And Mike Gibson was world class, like world class. Anybody that I ever met in the rugby circles, and you mentioned like great players, and these would be French people or what, you know, Mike Gibson was like a legendary rugby player, probably under recognized because he wasn't a big personality, wasn't the captain, but I think rugby people realize. And then way back, Jack Kyle, I think, is a Belfast guy, and that's you could have a whole show on him, Dr. Jack. So you know, rugby was very much in my conscience. I think all young people, you know, from Ireland, you're watching the Irish team, you support the Irish rugby team, and they had a really good team when I was growing up. You know, there was always a bunch of David Irwin was the captain, another doctor. Even though we were sort of on the outside of it, you were conscious of it and conscious of the excellence of it and the fact that they were coming up against huge rugby playing countries. And that sort of typified Willie John McBride being the captain of Lions in South Africa, having been there before and lost, and then ending up being the captain of a winning team. That's a brilliant achievement. You know?
Yeah, and even just add in Trevor England's name. You know, he's another Antrim man who was an Irish international and a Lion. I think actually Willie John McBride still holds the records for the number of Lions caps. You know, it's just tells, you know, this is incredible for a man from such a small place as Ballyclare is, but he's left his mark in rugby all right.
Neil, you've got to pick two before we bring in Stephen here. So, like, it sounds to me like Tony McCoy and Mary Peters are absolute certs.
Yeah, I think so. I really couldn't leave out Joey Dunlop either, to be honest. He, you know, or Terence McNaughton. This is very, very tough. Like, you have to realise that I can't go back to Cushendall unless I put Terence McNaughton in this selection.
Okay, you can give me four names here, and we're so give me your first two anyway. Who are the first two? No ifs, ands, or buts.
My first two are AP McCoy and Joey Dunlop.
Okay, all right. So we have a little bit of wiggle room here. Stephen Ferris, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks, Jerry. Keeping all right?
I'm keeping very well. I have to say, I think that there would have been a very good chance that you would have played your way onto this, but for your ankle injury. I'm not just buttering you up. I think that the trajectory of your career was explosive.
I'm not sure about that.
So listen, as a young kid growing up in County Antrim, because that's what we're talking about here, what was the situation with regards to who your rugby idols would have been?
Well, you know, I can remember sitting watching the European Cup semi-final, Stade Francais in Belfast, David Humphreys, you know, passing the ball, chip kick over the top, Reid Gallerin, pass back inside, and him scoring that unbelievable try that will live long in the memory of all the rugby fans, all the Ulster rugby fans. So, yeah, that was. I can remember sitting on my friend's settee eating a bag of potato, cheese, and onion, like at the time of that happening. And that was the first kind of going, geez, you know, wow, that was just world class. And then from there, you know, you were kicking on, watching guys like Tyrone Howe, who they ended up, you know, playing alongside with Dungannon, with Ulster. Big Andy Ward, who I'm friends with now, captained Ulster to the European glory in 1999. So yeah, there was around that era. Ger, I wasn't somebody that watched, you know, didn't go to Ulster matches when I'm 7, 8, 9 years of age watching the team. So I think somebody like David Humphreys or Andy Ward along that mould would be lads that I would have looked up to when I was sort of coming through the teenage years.
And in terms of historical guys, like Willie John got to mention there, I think the Mike Dean conversation is really interesting as well, because it might be somebody who people wouldn't automatically have gone to straight away, but with a bit of thought, you're kind of going, actually, hang on a second now, maybe Willie John is very iconic, but maybe there's actually a better player over here.
Yeah, possibly. Like Willie John's 80 years of age now. He's so many accolades, 5 Lions tours, you know, captained the Lions, the Test series wins, beating New Zealand, like South Africa, obviously destroying them, and was it 74?
Yeah.
Like so.
Sorry, I meant Mike Gibson there. Sorry, I completely misspoke.
Sorry.
Yes, not the referee, Mike Dean. That would have been.
Who is also a legend.
I would probably disagree with you, Ger. I would probably disagree with you. I think Willie John McBride is held a little more highly than Mike Gibson, and I think that's just because of, you know, those 5 Lions tours, like, you know, and going over to South Africa and really being the leader. 71 was it against New Zealand? He was one of the main guys there, and he always backed it up. He always led from the front, and I think if you spoke to 100 people walking down the street here in County Antrim, and you asked them to name one player from County Antrim that's played for Ireland, represented the Lions from the rugby era, I would say the majority of them would probably say Willie John McBride. So that's why I would edge towards him.
Okay, that's fair enough. In terms of actually the strength of the game when you were growing up and the club scene, is it a vibrant club scene in Belfast and Antrim, or is it still a traditional route you're coming through the schools?
Yeah, I think it's going from strength to strength. Obviously, the Belfast schools really are, you know, if you're going to make strides and try and get into the professional game, there's no doubt the 4 or 5, even Wallace High School there in Lisburn now is coming on leaps and bounds. So, yeah, the school system definitely is the strongest way to enhance your rugby and try and move forward if you're looking to get into Ulster academies and under 18, 19 squads. But the club game, you look at Ballymena, you know, fantastic club, has had some success over the years. Coleraine, I'm up in Portrush here at the minute. Ballymoney's a real good rugby club, a really good social scene to it. And I think, yeah, it can get stronger, Ger. Definitely 100% can get a lot stronger, but it's in no way in a bad place.
Has Kelly's at Portrush reopened just yet for all the students to have their nights out?
There's Darren Cave's actually just opened a coffee shop around in Port Stewart, so the queues have been down the street. So they have. I've yet to have been invited round for a free coffee and a free donut yet. Good
timing. Is there anybody else, Stephen, who you think deserves a shout from a rugby perspective? It sounds like there's a clear hierarchy in your mind. Like, hopefully really in terms of conversation about this, but when you kind of think about him being the number 1 out half for at least half a decade, and driving Ronan O'Gara to the heights where Ronan O'Gara ends up on the Cork Mount Rushmore, you know, he's not a million miles away.
No, he's not. He's not. I think David Woody has 74 caps for Ireland. You know, obviously a great career with Ulster. I prolonged his career by making all of his tackles in the last couple of years of his career. But yeah, he's a good guy. He's obviously went on to Gloucester. He's actually now back home. I see he's out playing lots of golf and spending a lot of time with his family. So I'll try and catch up with him. But I think in terms of talent, he was just extraordinary. Like, he really was. He couldn't tackle a fish supper, but when it came to his skill set, when it came to his kicking ability, You know, the 2006 hitting that drop goal against the Ospreys away in Wales. You know, he had all the attributes to definitely have his name mentioned in this conversation today.
And thanks very much for making that pitch for us. I think it's clear what Neil has to do. Neil, you've got to put Willie John McBride as the top rugby guy. How close is he to making?
He's unquestionably the top rugby player ever to come out of County Antrim. You know, he is. Not even whenever you talk about sports people from Antrim, when you talk about the most famous and well-respected and renowned rugby player that Ireland have ever produced, Willie John McBride will also be in that conversation. So, you know, if there's a rugby player going in here to the Mount Rushmore for County Antrim, Willie John McBride will be that person.
We're getting to that complicated part where we have candidates. Is there a boxer, Ciarán Barr, is there a boxer who stands out? Like, I was doing a bit of research on this, and like Wayne McCullough's achievement in going to Japan and winning a world title against a Japanese boxer almost never happens in boxing history. The two bronze medals from Paddy Barnes, like, we haven't spoken about that. Michael Conlon wins a world championship amateur, has still got a while to go in his professional career before you could kind of talk about him in the same terms as Dave Boy McCauley, who wins a world title. I'm leaving people out here, am I? Going back, Rinty Monaghan, you mentioned. Apparently he was the best of them all because he kind of unified things. Like, how do you pick a sport that's so important and integral to the history of the county and the city, essentially? How do you Carl Frampton, that was who I was leaving out.
Yeah.
What a career he's had.
Yeah, you probably need Jerry Story to filter all of those names and tell you who is the best. Like, my view would be Wayne McCullough. Now, why Wayne McCullough? Great amateur career, then turned pro and went to Japan. But then he fought a huge amount of fights in America and fought Mexicans and fought Colombians and fought all of the best guys that weight and went up and down a couple of weights. And that's the weights that you've got all of those top class South American, Cuban boxers. Like, it's just, and he was right up there with all that bunch. Like, and I remember watching some of those fights when I was in my 20s, you know, live from Las Vegas, or a recording of a fight from Las Vegas. And you'd hear interviews about him and what he was doing. And I think he lived in Las Vegas, and he was trained in one of those famous old gyms and all that. So for me, he fought in an era and at a level that was extraordinary, and took the risk of going and living in America, going actually and doing it, where you have to fight the best. There's no doubt about it, you know. Be my just because I remember him, not that he's absolutely the best, but that in my memory he's right up.
I think that's a good enough criteria. Actually, I want to bring Stephen Ferris back in. Stephen, if you could, if you're still there, because I completely forgot to ask you about the impact that Joey Dunlop had. I know when we were asking you, actually, he was the first name that you came up with before even one of the rugby guys. So why were you such a big fan of Joey?
I think Joey, like Carl Frampton at the minute, it didn't matter what side of the community you were from, whether you're Catholic or Protestant, or you know, what your beliefs were. Everybody loved Joey Dunlop. You know, that famous red helmet, the TT wins that he's had. Everybody forgets that he's an OBE, MBE. He travelled all around Eastern Europe with his charity work. There's a really good story. Stephen Watson, who's a news reporter, a sports reporter up here in Belfast, he used to travel all around with him. And he said to me, I messaged him earlier on for a bit of information on him. And he said, Stevie, when he went to wherever in the world, whether it was Japan, whether it was Estonia, Latvia, he was an absolute superstar. He would get off the airplane and there was hundreds and thousands of people waiting for him at the airport to get his photograph. He was a complete rock star. And like, you think about that in the 70s and 80s, you know, if his photo would be in the newspaper every single day if that was the case these days. And not too many people know about that. So he was an absolute rock star. He also helped make the famous Honda CBR. He worked for the Honda team in making that motorbike. And another good story, when he was in, I think it was Latvia, he was delivering aid to an orphanage out there somewhere. And he said he was in his van on his own, and it was that cold that he couldn't light a cigarette because the gas in the cigarette lighter had actually frozen. So, like, you know, that's the kind of lengths that he went to. He also raced with my wife's father, Will McNally, who passed away in 1999 at the Ulster Grand Prix. So again, there's an affiliation relationship there between myself and the Dunlop family. But I think I agree with the lad. He is by far high esteem in the county of Antrim, and it would be really remiss of me not to mention it.
I think he's definitely going to go up. I think there's a consensus emerging about him as well. You mentioned Carl Frampton there. Would he be your choice for a boxer?
Yeah, I think he definitely would. I think the weight divisions that he swapped about in the world title fight at the Titanic, what an iconic place to win your first world title against Martinez. I travelled to New York to watch him fight. I've travelled to Las Vegas. I've travelled all around the world to see young Carl. I'd be friendly with him. I would chat to him an awful lot. But it's boxing ability and the way he seems to bring the boxing community together, whether you're from the Falls Road or from the Shankill Road, it doesn't matter. He's a very level-headed, grounded young guy. And maybe, Ciarán, in a conversation in 5 years' time, if we were talking about the same thing here, his name might be first on the list, but he's still in the middle of his professional career. So maybe he's not just ahead of Joey Dunlop or Willie John McBride at the minute. And somebody else just to throw into the mix is Mark Allen, the snooker player, won the British Masters, I think, in 2018, number 4, number 5 in the world. And again, he's only 34 years of age. So maybe in 15, 20 years' time, that might be somebody else to throw into the conversation.
Yeah, he's. I think it's a good point actually about Carl Frampton. It gets us off the hook a little bit. He's still fighting, and so therefore we don't actually have to put him on, even though. So it's been a very worthwhile interjection there. Thanks very much for that, for Stephen.
No worries,
we're getting to squeaky bum time here. The case for all those people. Do we need to make a case for Alex Higgins? Is there any appetite in Alex Higgins on this?
I do. Alex Higgins now, obviously, he won a world title. To be world champion in anything, you have to be an incredibly talented guy. But whenever you look back at Antrim as a whole, and obviously a big part of Antrim's sporting history comes from Belfast, there just has to be a boxer in there. Now, my own personal preference would be Dave Boy McCauley, because I felt like he, from even researching his fights, he didn't duck anybody. Most fighters are taken through a certain channel to try and get them to a world title eliminator shot somewhere or another. Dave Boy just fought everybody. All comers took them on. He was actually quite tall for the weight that he fought at, and it left him just he looked kind of bigger than every opponent that he fought. But and he's not far around the coast, and he is an absolute gentleman. He runs a hotel just about 25 miles around the coast from Cushendall, and because maybe a feeling of that little kind of strong local connection that I would feel for that man, I think he would be my boxer. I know Ciarán has said probably Wayne McCulloch for him, and Stephen said Carl Frampton for him, but it would be Dave Boy McCauley for me, to be honest.
Okay, so are you putting Dave Boy McCauley on?
He's in.
AP is in.
Yeah.
Joey Dunlop is in.
Joey's in.
And it comes down to Ciarán,
Terence,
Mary Peters.
I'll get Neil off the hook. I would put Mary Peters on, right? But look at if you looked at Terence McNaughton's career, right? And I only looked this up the other day because I sort of knew that he played for Antrim for a long time. And one of my friends sent me a copy of a program from the reopening of the O'Donovan Rossett pitch in Shaw's Road. They did the changing rooms up or something in the 80s at some point. And they were playing a football match and a hurling match to open it up. And I think the hurling match was against Tipperary maybe, or Kilkenny, I don't know, anyway. And in the subs is Terence McNaughton, and I think he was 16 or 17. And he was a sub on the Antrim senior hurling team. So he played for, 16, 17, 18 years for Antrim. And he was, like, over all the records, one of the best hurlers that Antrim ever produced. There's no doubt about that. But what's significant about it, I think, is the fact that he played for so long, lots of injuries, and I was there a few times when he got hurt quite badly, so he came back from pretty serious injuries. And then to take the county team, which we all know, anybody that's involved in a county team, is a full-time job. It's 30, 40 hours a week on top of your own job. So to do that a number of times, as well as a volunteer, as well as taking Cushendall, senior team, underage teams, etc. So if there was a GAA person from Antrim, you'd be hard pushed not to pick Terence McNaughton.
Ciarán, I was told to raise Kevin Armstrong as somebody, and Shawnee Burns going back even before that, I think.
Yeah. Look. Kevin Armstrong was the Terence McNaughton of his day, but in both football and hurling. So Kevin, and if there was YouTube around and we had all the videos and all that crack as we do today, like Kevin Armstrong would be right up there. But I just don't know. Shawnee Burns is the same thing. I didn't see them play. There's no record. But everybody you talk to from that era would say, absolutely, Kevin Armstrong was a superstar, the guy to be stopped if you play at Antrim, number one guy to stop. But like, there's other guys, Jim Core, who played in goals for Antrim, was one of the best goalkeepers of his era as well, and so on and so on. But I think, Sambo played for a very long time at the highest level. Antrim were in Division 1. We were playing at the top table. And he was around for all of that period. There was a few other guys there with him as well, Humpy McKillen and a few others. But Terence was there from being 16-year-old to being into his 30s, and then take the managerial role after. That's a serious achievement.
Yeah, I think what Ciarán says can't really be underestimated. The effect that Terence McNaughton has had on not only my club but Antrim as a county. He's still so heavily invested. He's our current coach of the senior team. He has had 2 stints as Antrim senior hurling manager because we were finding it hard to recruit people into that position. And for those who know him, he's a real character. Now he can come off some super one-liners, shall we say, but he's got tremendous enthusiasm for the game. He's utterly passionate about it as his sole reason for being. There's no two ways about that. And he would have the ability to carry a younger generation through nearly on the back of what Ciarán and Terence and Alkin, as well as Brian Donnelly, Desi Donnelly, those guys achieved. That was always spoken about, and I suppose Terence really embodied the way that team played on the field, a group of fiercely determined, very physically powerful men. And I think we as a generation, my age group, we grew up idolising these people, and Terence really embodies everything that they've done and what they believed in for Antrim GA.
So we're a little bit stuck because you've got 5. There's room for 4. So we have definitely AP and Joey Dunlop.
Yeah.
And then it gets a little bit trickier after that. You've got Mary Peters, Terence McNaughton. And is that where you're going here? Are you putting the rugby player up or not? Did I skip? I have a feeling I skipped one. Oh, what are the boxers?
I think if I give you my 4, I think the final shout goes to Ciarán, so I can leave him with the hardest task of all, can't I? So I'm going to take my opportunity to do that. So my 4 would be number 1 is AP McCoy, number 2 is Joey Dunlop, and then number 3 I'm going to go for Dave Boy McCauley, followed by number 4, and it's going to be Terence McNaughton. But I know it's very harsh leaving Mary Peters and Willie John McBride out, but I just think there needs to be a GA representative in there, and I'm going for Terence McNaughton in the 4th slot.
So, Ciarán, you've made the case for Mary Peters.
Yeah, look, I think, unfortunately for me, boxing would lose out. I think it could have its own Mount Rushmore and its connection with Belfast. I don't think you can leave Mary Peters out. It is an iconic achievement, and given the time that it happened in the middle of the Troubles, and a very elegant lady, very well educated, very well spoken, great ambassador for Northern Ireland, and was an Olympic champion, which we talk about Olympic champions today. You know, you can list them off. There's like, it's just something that you say, whether it's in boxing or athletics or in swimming, you know, at the same Olympics, Mark Spitz. And so, you know, it's extraordinary, and was an extraordinary achievement. And she's a female. So females in sport today, and, you know, I'm involved in the GPA, and we've got the WGPA, and we're trying to support them as much as possible. There is, you know, it's difficult. It's not easy. There's a load of barriers in your way to become a champion of anything. And if you're a female, it's even harder. Mary Peters' achievement is extraordinary. Without trying to be condescending in any way, she overcame huge obstacles to get where she got to. She just had to.
It's track and field, so it's actually legitimately against the entire world as well. So it's AP, Joey Dunlop, Mary Peters, and Terence McNaughton. It's a pretty impressive mountain, and you can always tell how strong the mountain is by the subs bench, and the subs bench is pretty spectacular. So I hope you're all going to be able to go home to your respective houses and communities and say, yes, it's fine, we did okay. The final question is always, where does this go? Is this on the Black Mountain? Is this so you can see it in the city? And where is it going?
It'll have to be one of the Glens, I think. You know, they've got Game of Thrones anyway, so let's give them Mount Rushmore as well. You know.
Yeah, this would have to go on the cliffs around Tor Head, so it would, I think.
There you go. Very nice.
Looking out to Scotland.
Antrim's Mt Rushmore is in the books. It's been a brilliant conversation and a very, very rich history that the county of Antrim has. My thanks to Ciarán Barr and to Neil McManus. That was great, lads. Thanks a million.